pleasure to welcome to the Ash Institute Claus Offe, who was a professor of political science at Humboldt University in Berlin until he at least nominally retired in 2005. You wouldn't know it from his professional activities. Since 2006, he has taught on a part-time basis at the relatively new Hertie School of Governance in Berlin as well. Claus is, it's a real delight to welcome Claus here, because he was certainly one of my heroes in graduate school, because for his whole career he's worked tirelessly in the fields and cultivated them well, the fields of critical social science. Claus went to the Free University of Berlin, which he describes in a 1985 essay as the Berkeley of German university life. He speaks fondly of how the German SDS was extremely active at the Free University in Berlin. And that quote from the 1985 interview creates an occasion for me to show you my favorite political poster of all time, which is from the German SDS. And it says, everyone talks about the weather, we don't. And you see Marx, Lenin in the poster. And, yeah.
That is a quote from the railway.
Yeah, that's right. It's totally ironic, because I think it's probably best known because Ulrike Meinhof said this slogan, but she got it from the German National Railway, the Deutsche Bundesbahn, because if you're on that train, you don't have to think about the weather. In any case, Claus worked in the kind of early years of his scholarship with Habermas, and was immersed in the debates around the first generation of German critical theorists at the Frankfurt School, including Horkheimer, Adorno, and Marcuse. He's worked through his life on the problems of stability and the possibilities of liberation and democratic control, popular control in contemporary capitalist societies. These investigations have ranged very widely, and he certainly cannot be accused of getting stuck at any particular historical moment. He's ranged widely from considerations in political economy to cultural movements of the so-called post-material left, as well as the cultural right, to questions about innovations in democratic governance. Claus's work is one of the few social theoretic indulgences I've allowed myself in the Kennedy School classroom. Last semester when I was teaching a class with Mark Moore on sparking social change, we taught a very influential essay written by Claus on two logics of collective action, which is about the different collective action challenges that labor faces as opposed to capital. And the students found that extremely engaging. So I very much look forward to hearing about Claus's thoughts on the possibilities for motivating moral sentiments in public policy.
Thank you very much, Akon. Thank you all for being here and for inviting me. I want to, rather than the original title of Democratic Innovations, where I have the pleasure and privilege to teach for 13 weeks, here I thought a more focused approach would be appropriate for the 35 or 40 minutes I have. And I want to start with making a distinction that I think is quite commonsensical, but at the same time not often found. What are the resources of policy making? What are the resources? I want to subdivide the universe of policy resources into three broad families. First is the coercive enforcement of laws. The compliance of citizens as the target actors of public policy is primarily due, in this case, to rational fear in the sense of human forms. Namely, the desire of citizens to avoid negative and coercive sanctions. The second family of political resources is positive and negative incentives and policies that use this resource set prices, taxes, transfers, fines, subsidies, tax breaks, and so on. So it's a different kind of rationality that is invoked or addressed by this second factor. Public policy sets in this case parameters, for instance, parameters for saving energy, switching from private to public transport, tax subsidies for the installation of energy-efficient heating systems in residential buildings, and so on. Many cases where you get a premium in monetary terms, or a fine, or a tax. And then comes the third family on which I'm concentrating today, which is words. Doing public policy with words, paraphrasing Austin. That has to do with persuasion, moralization, educating the public, cognitive and motivational components. Here are the autonomous commitment on the part of citizens to doing the right thing, appeals to self-interest rightly understood, to Bill's phrase, and collective goods. So people are, by the means of rhetoric, by the means of words, informed and invited to do the right thing. And there are people are not just addressed by words, they talk to each other and thereby exercise mechanisms of horizontal social control, such as shaming others, blaming, naming. These are all verbal, linguistic forms of policy making, much softer, much less formalized, but for reasons that I come to of great interest. By words, we appeal to the, again, three dimensions or components or aspects of political reasonableness. Reasonableness is the term. That also play, and I know many of you are interested in this, a role in deliberation. There are three kinds of reasonableness, or three kinds of argument that you can make in the sense, be reasonable. The first of these is, be reasonable regards the facts. And the opposite of this is, I explain what the facts are, and the opposite of this is error, myth, prejudice, magical thinking, and so there is a tension or a friction there between fact regardingness and magical thinking, and a long dimension in between. The second is future regardingness. Think about the future, practice solidarity with your own future self versus myopia, short-sightedness, and ad hoc thinking. And the third, of course, is the dimensions of reasonableness, when we say you don't think only of yourself, think of others as well. And that is the social dimension, selfishness versus other regardingness. So the three implicit debates that go on when we use words are fact regardingness, we need more information to make a judgment on this matter. Future regardingness, can we know what this means in the long term, this policy, and other regardingness. Okay, these considerations of reasonableness, these three aspects, have in political theory, democratic on the input side of the political process. That is when we try to find out what we really want. Preference formation, interest formation, that is where all these three questions play out. What I want to argue is that it also plays a role on the output side of the political process. That is on the side of output, implementation, and outcomes of policies. So what are the difference between the uses of these three resources or families of resources? One could say that from the first to the third there is an increase in cost efficiency. Words are in a particular way cheap. We all know a language and we can use it and we can talk to others. We do not need taxes and we do not need a bureaucratic apparatus. We do not need enforcement and so on. Things do not need to be done through an enforcement apparatus or through tax authorities, all of which are very costly arrangements. Often they can be done through words alone or in combination with other resources, so you get a resource mix. The cost of installing energy efficient systems are never 100% covered out of state revenues in these incentivized programs. There remains a residual cost that the citizen must bear either out of a sense of responsibility, of which he can be convinced through words, or out of an interest in long-term cost effects. So there are mixed cases. So there is much speaks in terms of efficiency for using words. Word talking is cheap also in this sense. But the third mode, using words, is arguably also the most unreliable and therefore least effective. Responses of citizens to stated policy objectives and arguments in support of them can range across a wide scale, from principles, for instance, libertarian obstruction and sabotage. You have no right to talk to me, right? I have the right not to listen to you. And, critique of paternalism and so on. This is one extreme. The other extreme is a strong commitment caused by words, which leads the target actors of the public policy to engage in what in Roman Catholic theology is called opera supererogativa, doing more than is required out of enthusiasm for policy. But it can change along this entire, what words do is hard to predict. This is, and it can also be the case that only a few respond favorably, others do not turn out to be convinced. It can change over time and so on. So while words are cheap, words are also less reliable than a strongly enforced law with all the policing apparatus that you need for it all, and also arguably with incentives, so more efficient, less effective. And you need to back up policies that you start with words in time by adding incentives and then finally adding prohibitions. What starts as a government-sponsored moral persuasion campaign and soft recommendations, it then gradually hardens through prices and tax incentives and finally coerced. take the example of snow tires. The history of snow tires was voluntary first. You know, think of what can happen to you if you don't have them, and then they were incentivized or filter mechanism, and finally they were made mandatory. You could not do without it. Or smoking. Also, you give moral campaigns, and then second, you get price increases. But
it could go the other way.
Yeah, it could go, but it does not.
Let's imagine forced busing leading to changes in morals.
Okay.
Anyway,
the example,
moving on.
the examples I have found, and this is very much work in progress and speculation and, you know, circumstantial and anecdotal evidence, but I think there is a strong drift of policies to start with words and to end with police or policing, right? Sometimes, and now I come to the exception of that general rule. So, from persuasion to punishment. There are mixed cases also, which seem to be stable. They are composed of several policy resources. Governments do only attempt to increase their authoritative control and enforcement capacity through extension of monitoring capacity, so that you can more easily and in a more targeted way enforce, but also through enlisting ordinary citizens as auxiliary enforcers, and by implication to appealing through suasion to their sense of civic duty. Citizens are asked, and I have met several examples of both in Sweden and in the United States. Citizens are asked to report. Every morning on the bus I hear this, report suspicious behavior or objects, right? So the ordinary passenger of a bus is then asked to help the state in enforcing, and there is some engagement to do that. In Sweden it's the same in connection with tax evasion, that you are supposed to report on your neighbor's untaxed illegal labor that he or she.
When it's illegal not to report.
It is illegal not to report. Yeah. It is. You are forced. You do not rely on patriotism alone. Right? you have the duty, the civic duty, to report on others. Yes. Well, we have seen that in other political systems. Another mixed case is what Sunstein and Thaler have referred to as nudges. They think of an architecture of decision which frames and manipulates opportunity, the perception of choices and opportunities, how food is arranged in the supermarket, and so on, with the candies often right near the cash register where parents with children have to wait, and then
the least healthy, the easiest to purchase.
Exactly. That is the idea, and they propose to change this. Namely, in the sense that unhealthy food is to be kept out of the sight of children. That is architecture, and that can be mandatory. You know, where you place what can be mandatory, and thereby structuring the architecture of decision. But my thesis is that many of today's public policy objectives do not lend themselves to incentivization or authoritative enforcement. They are either reached through persuasion or they are reached not at all. For policymakers, there is no recourse to coercion or incentives available. You cannot punish or incentivize people to feed their kids the wrong food that leads to child obesity. Another case. You simply have to appeal to the responsibility or you fail. Other options. So the third family of policy resources becomes somehow prominent because it's the only one that can work. If that is true and reflexively known to be true by policy elites, we would expect to see an increase in policies of mere persuasion that works through appeals to social and moral, as opposed to formal legal norms, as well as to what the political sociologist Steinringen has called signals, as opposed to orders and incentives. In fact, we seem to see such an increase, although I do not know of a way, and I've tried to find out of a way to measure such increases over time. What is the shift in policy composition that lends itself to authoritative enforcement of legal orders, and what is the mix that depends upon and relies upon these soft strategies. Let me read to you, I must confess, the only well, coherent and well-documented treatment of this question by Steinringen in a manuscript that he called The Powerlessness of Powerful Government. Okay, and he writes, decisions containing weak orders I call signals. They are suggestions about behaviors or mindsets without compulsory compliance. You cannot force people to do it, you can convince people to do it. What are the examples? People are endlessly, Ringen observes, being told by their governments how to behave and what to do and not to do. We are recommended to eat healthy food, not to smoke, to not drink and drive, to save more and spend less, or the other way around if the economy is lax. to take holidays at different times of the year, to use public transport, to practice safe sex, to keep children at home and off the streets at night, to not call out the doctor needlessly, to read worthy literature, to not litter the landscape, to like the opera, to buy homemade products, to pick up and dispose of dog droppings, to economize with water and electricity, to wash our hands before eating, to pay careful attention to consumer information on food products, to make ourselves computer literate, to take exercise. Hardly anyone or any activity is free from advice from governments about what to do and how to think. Campaigns for or against this and that and the other are a constant feature of modern governments, relying on these third family type of communications. Governments, to summarize, rule by taxing, spending and regulation, but that is not enough. They, in addition, depend on speaking. They need to inform, to explain, to sell their policy, to make themselves trust, and so on. Okay, this is the type of policies I'm interested in, and this is a very ambiguous, also normative terrain. So if it is true that such policies, I mean, Ringen is exaggerating broadly, but if they are quite prominent, then it seems that public policy implementation follows a pattern that is well known from the political economy of personal services. Such services are not like goods unilaterally produced by some manufacturer and then sold to consumers and later consumed and used. But they are generated in the process of co-production between supplier and client, between policymaker and citizen, that is, as in the co-production between personal services, physician and patient, teacher and student, and even hairdresser and client. So what are the characteristics of policy areas in which these soft patterns of control and rhetoric are most likely to be encountered? If only by default, that is because other and harder ones are not available or do not operate. But all I can do, and I emphasize this, is in the mid of something, at best in the mid of something. All I can suggest at this point is an unsystematic list of policy areas in which this actually can be observed. The reliance on persuasion, rhetoric, and so on. The oldest is perhaps war-related. Modern warfare is a classical case of co-production between political authorities who declare war and citizens who support the war effort by signing war bonds, volunteering for military service, and enduring war-related costs and sacrifices out of a sense of patriotism, national loyalty, and shared hostility to the enemy. I mean, many examples from World War I, especially at the beginning, support this moral mobilization in addition to. Governments at war are powerless in the absence of such mass support. Think of the history of the Vietnam War. And they try to frame support through information policy, television, control of dangerous, support eroding implication of television, embedded journalists, all with the purpose of winning the hearts and minds of the people, both in the countries against whom war is being waged and at home. What rhetoric aims at is not just shaping opinion and belief, which is normal propaganda, but positive and negative behavioral dispositions, doing things by words, by leading others to do certain things who are addressed by these words. What are contemporary policy areas where this plays a big role? Environmental policy. Everything that has to do with the environment, energy, climate. The objective is to educate and motivate citizens and consumers to sort the household garbage, to minimize the carbon footprint, and so on. And with some considerable success this takes place. Together with, strengthening motivation through providing information. Another field is health and nutrition, including campaigns for consumer education, far-sighted and responsible preventive self-help in the interest of one's own health and that of others. I told about my little bus rides every morning, and then I have one stop on the T on the subway. And there I always see and like and take to heart the instruction on how to sneeze the right way, right? Which is a major component of a preventative strategy of,
Is this in Sweden?
No,
Here
this
in
here
Cambridge,
in Cambridge,
Mass.
yes.
Central Square.
From Central Square to, you cannot fail to see it. sneeze. This way, right? Because not to if you have no tissue, then you do it this way, not in order not to.
Spread germs.
Yeah, right. I mean, the campaign on child obesity works in similar ways. Education. Skill acquisition is no longer exclusively mandatory primary education through a public school system, but is a sequence of ambitions, acts and efforts that are driven by citizens' sense of solidarity with their own future selves. And education policy relies heavily on motivation building and opportunity creating and informing about opportunities that are available, also well to be seen on the subject track. Another, I mean, I'm for 40 years now, I'm interested in labor market policy, and it's a total shift in labor market policy with the rise of policies of contractualization of benefits. It used to be the case that you have rights. Now it's the case that you have to pay for your rights. You do something in exchange, giving it back to society. For that, you need the right work attitudes and work habits as a core element of the new generation. I mean, the Clinton welfare reform, the German Hartz legislation, virtually in all EU countries, you have a shift from rights to earned entitlements. In order to earn entitlements, you have to develop, adopt, and show the right work attitudes. Another field is gender relations, and with the intuition also of many feminists is that anti-discrimination is not sufficient. We need to adopt and implant and encourage attitudes of egalitarian recognition. In the last analysis, the glass ceiling phenomenon can only be overcome by a mental reform rather than legal reform. That is, I think, widely shared. Then, unlike the field, demography in Germany and other European countries, southern European countries, in particular Spain and Italy, the demographic crisis is very much in the public debate. The net reproduction of 1.27, Germany 1.25, Italy 1.23, Spain. I mean, raises obvious concerns and so on. So, under the green, red, or red-green, one should say, coalition from 1998 through 2005, the Ministry of Family Affairs in the Federal Republic, new format, started a big campaign showing an attractive young male stating, "I want a child." And there was a whole series, propagating having children, right? You cannot enforce it, you cannot incentivize it, you can only popularize the idea. And that was followed up by a campaign reminding the public that it is a good idea to read stories to young children, and reminding parents of educational responsibilities. And so the only thing you can do is through strengthening the role of parents and their educational practices in preventing juvenile crime and drug use is another thing. Another field is the mobilization of civil society in the service of charitable and philanthropic purposes and donation campaigns, partly substituted for fiscally and politically unaffordable policies of poor relief. Another field where I see this is traffic and transportation safety, inculcating standards of considerateness and civilized behavior become the best. Social integration and social cohesion in migrant societies is another important policy field that is partly organized by ministries and public administration, labor market agencies, partly also by trade unions. The famous CFDT, a French campaign, "Don't Touch My Body," was clearly addressed to racist attitudes toward North Africans among the French working class. So there may be others, but these came to mind, and these but could document these details. So the general argument is we live in it, obviously, and for a reason that we do not well understand, in a time where moralizations, with appeals to the virtues of prudence, awareness, responsibility, including corporate social responsibility, toleration. We live in a time of moralization of public policies which pursue goals that cannot be reached or cannot be reached alone through more conventional means of giving and enforcing legal and administrative orders or through setting incentives. Such moralization can be celebrated. It has widely been the case as the revival of the role of civil society and civic virtue. That it can, and here's the problem, yet it can also give rise to the critical question whether matters ought to be left to the responsibility of the state and state policies for the sake of cost efficiency and budgetary austerity, whether they can be and should be delegated to individual citizens to cope with. For instance, if it is a good idea to minimize the consumption of plastic materials for ecological reasons, why not start at the supply side and make the use of biodegradable containers or paper bags mandatory, rather than to shift the responsibility to the demand side, that is the consumer. Similarly, if we want to make transportation more energy efficient, why not invest in more user-friendly and effective systems of public transport and make individual transportation with passenger cars very costly in downtown areas, as it is the case in London, or less time efficient through speed limits, which would quasi-automatically lead to greater energy efficiency. Is not the reliance on strategies of behavioral change and moralization on the demand side just a preventive means of victim blaming, following the logic of "we told you so"? So you are to blame. Should not those who are in control of the informational input that is required for prudent behavior, that refers to you, those be mandated to fully disclose to the public the information that is needed for the formation of prudent judgment and preferences? Shouldn't it be a duty of suppliers to inform the public about it, and thereby maybe economize on moral efforts? Without trying to provide an answer to these difficult normative questions, let me, in conclusion, turn to a series of natural experiments that have been conducted in the Colombian capital of Bogota under its mayor, he believes, can you turn on the first one? Yeah. He believes, so this materials I've taken from him. He believes that people can be taught that citizenship is something that can be learned. Citizens are not born as citizens; they learn citizenship. And okay, Marcus has developed a method that comes close to doing things with words alone, plus with methods of non-verbal communication, which is very important in his repertoire, such as the theatrical use of mimes, red cards, wearing finger ribbons,
describe what these are. You need to. I don't think everyone knows.
Okay, you have a piece of plastic cord. This is the red cards, the citizen red cards that they can show to officials and other citizens for disapproval and approval. A wonderful thing that I have not documented here, and actually I have it on my wall in my office at home in Berlin, is a postcard size kind of postcard that comes with a ribbon that you put on your finger, and the postcard says with very nice pictograms, non-verbal communication, what you may not do and what you should not do as a voter. Right? You should never vote more than once. You should never sell your vote. You should never vote under the impact of a gun. You should never vote only against something. You should, wonderful pictograms of 9 rules of correct voting, and who agrees with this is all in orange. Wears an orange ribbon around her. Anyway, so this is the somewhat playful and at the same time eccentric type of moral campaigns. He has developed this method. He believes that art can be a catalyst of moral, legal and cultural self-regulation, with the corresponding forms of sanctions being guilt, moral, punishment, legal, and most importantly, shame and social rejection in the case of social and cultural norms. What are the features of the communicative situation that he creates? There is for 2 terms, a person, former university rector or president, who is recognized as honest, original, trustworthy, somewhat eccentric, with high visibility in the local electronic media. This person tries, as he puts it, to tap the moral resources of the urban society, and moral resources that need not be generated, but they are somehow hidden, but in place already. He does not propose new norms, but reminds people of the evident validity of existing and well-known legal, moral, and social cultural norms, as, for instance, the bottom line in a way, la vida es sagrada. I say something about this. The main thing is to fight cynicism, that is, the widely shared and self-fulfilling view that everyone else is routinely violating these norms anyway, therefore I do not have to follow them, right? And no one else has to follow these norms. This cynicism can be fought by positive feedback. Sometimes these norms, also these campaigns try to demonstrate, are in fact complied with, and the level at which that happens can be increased. Can we? Okay. Okay. This is the beginning. The peak is the beginning. Okay. The red is Bogota, and the gray is all of Colombia. And in '93, he starts his campaign concerning homicides that have been reduced by 80%, something in this, within 10 years. That is quite quite dramatic. And,
do we know anything about the reasons for the build-up?
I do not. No, I do not, but it would be interesting. I mean, it is on levels that it has been in the late 70s. So,
what do we know about the reasons for the decline?
Okay. The activation of moral resources. That is how he describes this, and in many other areas. It depends very much. The communicative situation depends very much on the media. And the media means that everyone knows that everyone else has also been addressed by these reminders. And as a consequence, everyone knows that she or he is under the observation of some other agents, which puts into effect the expectation of horizontal disapproval. If I violate the norm, there will be horizontal disapproval. So what are the applications that he uses here? And there's a few more. Fraud in voting, I have already explained. And this amazingly successful idea that on Thursday evenings the women should go out and the men stay home with family. And so that was a big success. More important, campaigns against, and you get similar curves like this. This is deaths in traffic accidents. Paying taxes. A campaign, 30% of the people who have to pay taxes pay less than what they are supposed to. Therefore, we need to find people who pay more than they are. Asking for donations. A massive success. Collecting illegal firearms, saving water. City of 6.2 million people in an elevation of 2,800 meters. I mean, water is the main problem. And I'm not sure whether I have the water example. No, that's...
City tax revenues.
These are the tax revenues. Both increase tax honesty and also soliciting donations. Saving water, homicides I have mentioned, special things of conversion of dangerous firework industry that was there and has all kinds of explosions. Then positive sanctions. So citizens are asked to report to the city hall every case where they find a cab driver who is friendly, drives safely, and has a clean car. Right? And so positive sanctions, and they get a medal or something. So it is. I mean, this is. It sounds funny. It is extremely popular, and we both have heard him lecture. It is quite impressive of what is being done by tapping moral resources alone, under a condition where he says we cannot even afford to think about prisons. It's too much too expensive. We do not have the funds for that. So moral resources substituted for prison. Maybe too nice to be true. Thank you.